Hello, my name is Pamela Pettis. I am a senior from Charleston, South Carolina. I decided to present this topic because it's something near to my heart. There are many people who suffer daily with depression and anxiety. I happen to be one of these people. I was diagnosed with depression my sophomore year and anxiety my junior year. I actually made an attempt to end my life on February 22nd, 2018. Thankfully, my best friend stopped me, and I'm still alive, although it was a struggle for a few months afterwards. Most people who have suicidal thoughts or actions do not want to die. They simply want the pain to stop, and it seems suicide is the only available option. There are six main reasons why people attempt suicide. Depression is the leading reason for suicide attempts. Severe depression is always accompanied by a pervasive sense of suffering, as well as the belief that escape from it is hopeless. The pain of existence often becomes too much for severely depressed people to bear. The state of depression warps their thinking, allowing ideas like everyone will be better off without me to make rational sense. Psychosis is the next reason. Psychosis is much harder to mask than depression and is arguably even more tragic. People with mental illness can often hear voices which command them to harm themselves or others. Drugs and alcohol can cause impulsivity. Those under the influence may find themselves in situations and emotions they would not be in or feel when they are sober. Alcohol is a depressant, and often when people are sad, they tend to drink more, which leads them to feeling more depressed. This can unfortunately lead to suicide attempts. A cry for help is common amongst teenagers. During adolescence, many teenagers have teenage angst, and their emotions are all over. They don't usually want to die, but do want to alert those around them that something is seriously wrong. They often don't believe they will die and choose ways they believe won't kill them. However, it does unfortunately happen. A desire to die is usually seen in individuals that are terminally ill. They feel it would be better to end their lives themselves than wait for the illness to kill them. Accidental suicide is seen in youth. Playing with guns or attempting oxygen deprivation for the feeling of being high are the main causes of accidental suicide. According to ASFP, or the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, these numbers are the most accurate they can have. Due to the stigma associated with suicide and suicide attempts, there is a significant amount of suicide attempts that are not reported. In South Carolina, on average, one person dies by suicide every 10 hours. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 34 in South Carolina. Rachel Prechnow, PhD, with Psychology Today writes, there are many ways for one person to leave another's life. Suicide may be the most painful way for those left behind. The death of a loved one is never easy to experience, whether it comes without warning or after a long struggle with illness. But several circumstances set death by suicide apart and make the grieving process more challenging. Suicide is traumatic. Death by suicide is sudden, sometimes violent, and usually unexpected. Depending on the situation, survivors may need to deal with the police or handle press inquiries. Some suicide survivors develop post traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, an anxiety disorder that can become chronic if not treated. In PTSD, the trauma is involuntarily relived in intrusive images that can create anxiety and a tendency to avoid anything that might trigger the memory. Stigma, shame, and isolation. Within communities, especially the Black community, there is a stigma attached to suicide and mental illness. Suicide can isolate survivors from their community and even from other family members. Many religions condemn suicide as a sin, so survivors may be reluctant to acknowledge or disclose the circumstances of such a death. Mixed emotions. One of the main issues with suicide survivors is the whirlwind of emotions felt. If someone is murdered, a family can direct their anger towards the murderer. When a person commits suicide, the family cannot place their anger on anyone. The surviving family may also feel rejection and abandonment because the victim left them and didn't ask for help. Need for reason. Many family members may not understand why the person killed themselves. Since the person is no longer alive, they are left with numerous what ifs. They may begin to condemn themselves for not recognizing the signs or being able to change the outcome. Risks for survivors. Survivors who have lost a family member to suicide have an increased risk of attempting suicide themselves. After a loss of a loved one, it's not unusual to wish you were dead. That doesn't mean you'll act on the wish. But if these feelings persist or grow more intense, confide in someone you trust and seek help from a mental health professional. For the resources and services, I have provided services and resources for both people feeling suicidal and people who are survivors of a family member suicide. First is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This lifeline is a national network of local crisis centers that provides free and confidential emotional support to people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The second resource is support groups for survivors of suicide. There are many survivors of suicide support groups nationwide, but I have listed the 4 groups in South Carolina. The contact information is also listed. When I was still dealing with my depression, my friends would say, "Think of your mom and your sisters." When I was in the headspace of ending my life, I never thought about them. I felt trapped within my mind, but they were never trapped in there with me. After completing this project, I understand how detrimental it would be to all my family. My sisters, my stepdad, my grandmother, and my mother. It would destroy them. I may not like my family all the time, but I love them forever. I love them enough to love myself and love life. I found a video of letters suicide survivors wrote to the person who left their lives. It touched me, and I hope it can touch someone else. Thanks for listening. You are loved.
Dear Noreen.
Dear Alex.
Hey, Veronica.
Dear Pops.
You were my bestest childhood friend.
You were a second mom to me.
You were the best brother.
The whole family tell me we're very similar. She was like, I look just like your dad.
We called you Tricky Alex because of all the pranks that you pull on us.
The main entrance to your house was that stairway, and you would always run down, "Jessica!"
Everybody say you can't dance. And they show me little videos of you. You just be grooving.
Remember when you would scale the walls in the kitchen? And when someone would come around the corner, you'd be there in the middle of the doorway waiting to surprise us.
You had got a Sir Mix-a-Lot tape, and we all listened to it in your room when you opened it, and we were just jamming and having a good time.
You had the most beautiful garden. It was a lot of work all the time with me and my friends.
If you were here today, I would imagine you still probably volunteering, even with helping the elderly.
I would imagine you would be a doctor.
You would be teaching art, absolutely. I would be in your class. Going to the library together. I know you like reading. You'll be helping me with my career.
You're just full of energy and a lot of life.
When I found out about your passing, I was at home by myself after school.
The doctor came in and said you were gone.
But I thought you had a heart attack. Towards high school, she told me the truth. She was like, well, your father died. He had overdosed on pills or whatever.
And we were supposed to see each other that weekend. So I broke down in tears, confused, mainly because I had just spoken to you.
And I wanted to physically save you. I wanted to save you. And I didn't really know what to do.
A lot changed. I grieved a lot. It was like a complete void at that time.
I just don't understand how you could take a life like that, you know?
Did you think about us? Or maybe you didn't, so it wouldn't change your mind?
There's just so much pain. It's unbearable pain.
I got angry because my best friend, your daughter, changed after that.
Until this day, every time I step foot in that house, I still look up those stairs. I still hear your voice.
Your dad is still looking for peace.
I wish you were here today because there's ways that we still need you. I know I need you because, like, I'm still a young man. I got a long ways to go.
I wish I knew why you felt the need to just completely leave.
Somewhere in the decision-making process, you figure that everyone would be better without you. And that's not true.
You're a good son. You were a good friend. You know you were loved, you feel me? You the heart of the family.
You matter. You always did. You always will.
Alex, you were a little brother. You were full of life and full of energy. You were a good person. I know you're with me every day. Love you, old buddy.
And I love you.
I love you.
And I will always treasure our friendship. And for that, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you.